Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here, looking at Bungo Stray Dogs #1. This is the Loot Anime edition. I hate Google Play. I enjoyed Bungo Stray Dogs enough that I don't know. Well, I keep it. I'll probably donate it. Like, something has to be absolutely amazing for me to want to keep it. But I liked it enough. I thought, well, I'll buy the digital book and I can come back and read it later. And Google Play sucks. I hate the digital edition of this. There's like missing gags. If Google wants to be our evil overlords, they have to learn how to scan something at 300 dpi, or they got to make it so that you don't buy the book legally from Google Play and then immediately go pirate it so you can actually read the thing. But all that is to say that I enjoyed Bungo Stray Dogs enough that I actually want to read more of it, even if it doesn't like reach my highest recommendation standards where I actually want to save it forever and ever and ever. This is what I would call a good weeby book, and I distinguish a weeby manga from just a good manga. If a weeby manga is something where you kind of have to enjoy manga to get into it, and just a generally good manga is something you should read, even if some of like the weeby traits of manga annoy you. And Bungo Stray Dogs kind of falls into the weeby good manga category for a few reasons. Like, number one, it's kind of a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen thing where all the characters are apparently based on famous Japanese art authors and poets who I've never heard of. I think I recognized Edogawa's name because Edogawa was the mystery writer who inspired Future Boy Conan. And I didn't pick that up until the end, of course, because I'm a weeb, but that doesn't mean I know anything about actual Japanese literature, right? This also has a lot of great traits as just like a good packed first volume with action, mysteries, and some fun plot stuff. Man, those blisters, all my blisters are healing from work. Tangents. All right. So there's some like little fun, goofy gags at the front and back cover that get left out of the digital edition. So suffice to say that there's a kid who's wandering around hungry and he runs into Osamu Dazai. I wonder if he's named for Osamu Tezuka. Probably not. But the first reason this is kind of weeby is it has the trait of like over-the-top anime characters where they have a very silly personality, and that personality comes off very strong, and you don't know much about their like inner psychology at first. It's just their kind of over-the-top, silly, comedic persona. So Osamu Dazai, he wants to commit suicide. He's really cool, and he's kind of because he keeps trying to commit suicide and fails, all of his comrades are kind of like sick of his BS. They don't really care anymore. He's like been the kid who cried wolf too many times. And Kunikita is like kind of like the old school Japanese Bushido guy who's really uptight and obsessed with his ideals and his principles and kind of irritated, but also like a little slow on the uptake so because he's sort of naive and idealistic, people can play with him easily, and things fly over his head. There are a few cool little mystery twisteroos that I won't spoil. They genuinely surprised me the first time I read, and the second time I read, I kind of saw the foreshadowing and thought it was cool. But pretty much, they're supernatural detectives, and they're going to welcome this kid manages to kind of earn his way into their ranks. And I like that for the mysteries, there's kind of like an element of, we got to, investigate and figure some things out. We got to use our powers in a smart way. And there's an element of like, cool superpower fighting. So here's like the page explaining like all the characters. And I'm sure somewhere on YouTube, someone's got a great video explaining every obscure Japanese author in poetry and literature category that these are supposed to represent, and why their silly personalities are an homage to some classic Japanese author. I'm sure that Edogawa was the only name I even dimly remembered from seeing it in other manga. But the point I wanted to make on this page is I like how a lot of Japanese supernatural stories think of superpowers in a different way than Western superheroes do. Like if you go back to Spider-Man, Stan Lee's stories about how Spider-Man got created are probably apocryphal, but the story he used to tell that's probably a legend is he saw a fly crawling on a wall and thought about, well, what if a superhero could crawl on walls? I'd believe that. That seems like a reasonable way to come up with a superpower, right? And then if you read like the early letters to the editor from Spider-Man fans, they were really interested in Spider-Man's powers. Because if you think about it, a lot of superheroes, they have the super strength, They have the flying. They can blast super lasers out of their hands like Captain Marvel. But characters who have like a completely unique power set are pretty unusual. And I think in a lot of Japanese manga, because they're not as obsessed with Western style superheroes as we are, when they take inspiration from superheroes, it's kind of like they put their own twisteroo on it. So sometimes they give their characters like dumb superpowers that make us roll our eyes, but I think they're really inventive in what they do with superpowers generally. Or if it's a classic superpower, like Kunihita, he can make constructs with his notebook, right? But the kind of limitation is that he has to use a page from his notebook and he has to be very precise about it. So that's kind of like making constructs, that's a classic superpower, but they give him kind of a cool limitation that fits with his personality a bit. I think one of the best ways to think about superpowers is how would a character with a certain personality, like an angry personality or a fastidious personality, how would that superpower work in their hands? Why'd I mark this? There's like a creepy... Okay. The reason I marked this is a silly gag, because there's a consistent comedy theme throughout this, and I think the presentation is what makes it work. So they're kind of like a big dopey family who make fun of each other and do stupid things while they also do, super serious detective work. So these two play the equivalent of Japanese rock, paper, scissors to decide who has to fight the guy, right? And then they do like the little kids game, and that's how they come up with their strategy. So it's a dumb gag, they do a silly thing as part of their strategy. But what makes it work is they just do it and then they go to the action. They don't have someone say, OMG, it's totally random that you guys play rock, paper, scissors to come up with your strat. You don't need to say that the silly thing is silly. Just let them do the silly thing and then keep on hustling. And it'll read as funny because it's sort of like a relieving moment in the middle of, oh no, terrorist situation, he's got a bomb. Dumb thing, back to disarming the bomb. There's like an incest joke. I don't think that it's seriously saying that there's an incestuous relationship, but they're just kind of joking that there's a creepy sibling pair where the girl seems to have that interest in her brother. So that's kind of a mature gag. They don't show anything like explicit or nasty, I think. I think they're just trying to like make it unsettling and weird everyone out. And why'd I mark this? Oh, there was this great scene where the kid is having a hard time. He's having to get used to a new... He's been a lonely orphan, and now he's got a family, right? So they kind of put him to the test and ask him to do some mystery work. Like, tell us what our occupations were based on observations you make. And he's able to very closely guess everyone's occupation except for Danzai's here, like suicide guys. And Suicide Guy's occupation has been a mystery for a long time. Ooh, a mystery! Right? That's great. So it also fits with his kind of like, you start thinking, I wonder if that has something to do with his suicide obsession. Why does nobody know who he is? And there's actually a payoff in this volume, but I won't spoil it. And then they immediately kind of establish that there's like a mafia, and whatever you do, you don't screw with the mafia, which is cool because we've got like this superpowered detective agency based on Japanese novelists and poets, and there's like a guy they just do not F with, if you see him, run away. Great threat. So now the poor kid, he's the least experienced one, and he's met all these experienced superpowered people, and he's learned there's a guy who we just don't mess with. And guess what's going to happen? He's going to have to deal with the guy they just don't mess with, of course. I won't spoil anything else. It's really fun, kind of like superpowered detective stuff. So in the closing credits, they have this in-character thing where two of the characters joke about how they should do a comedy bit, and the author is just too shy to comment on his own work. But then they share some really interesting commentary about this. Let me see here. Asagiri said, this postscript would make me stand out too much. I'd be so embarrassed, I'd die on the spot. He basically has the sense of presence of an inchworm, you see. So then they make the comment here. I talked about how it'd be cool if the old guard of Japanese poets and novelists was remade into dashing young men with supernatural abilities, and the editorial room started going nuts for it. So, high concept. Start with a high concept. What if all the old Japanese poets and novelists were handsome young men with superpowers and a detective agency? And then deliver on the concept in such a way that I didn't know anything about that, and yet I still just got into, oh boy, superpowered detectives, and kids who are lonely who find their friends. Oh boy. These are just like classic Japanese tropes. and it was really well executed. Nothing like shocked me. Nothing was like something I'd never seen before in manga. But I really appreciate a perfectly solid, well-paced thing that delivers the actions and the laughs throughout. So I was completely entertained throughout. Okay, I always pay attention when they thank the staff. So thanks to everybody for reading. Artist Sango Harukawa. Background support Kina-san. Dazai's handwriting. S-san, my friend. Kunikita's handwriting, P-san, my friend. So some, what do you call it? Calligraphy to help with the lettering. And then like a silly gag where Kunikita's so dumb he thinks that if someone mentions God that means they're a Christian. It's funny stuff. Silly Billy. Oh, it's like Dickens. Charles Dickens wrote characters who were kind of one-dimensional, silly, over the top. They had cartoonish mannerisms, and people bag on Charles Dickens for that. I think that was one of his strengths, was that he came up with all of these funny, memorable characters that were very cartoonish in their mannerisms. So that's kind of like how I see a lot of silly, weeby anime characters with silly, over-the-top personalities, is that's a starting point to give you maybe like some comedic hijinks and some comedic back and forth. And then hopefully, if you're a good author, you can build some, real depth and some real meaning on that. So fun little character building, some silly Billy back and forth between the characters based on their personalities that isn't too on the nose. Some cool, not the best fighting scenes I've ever seen, like hopping around using the cool superpowers kind of stuff. Completely, thoroughly entertaining, and I really enjoyed it. Google Play sucks. You should buy it legally and then go pirate it so that you don't have to read it on the awful Google Play format. Google is going to be the absolute worst totalitarian dictatorial overlords ever. But I'm #1 Marmaduke fan, and even though Google sucks, you should like, comment, and subscribe. Click the bell to receive notifications. Check out my Subscribestar, the best way to support this channel. I thank my subscribers on Subscribestar at the end of every video. Thanks to everyone who's given a super chat. I love you guys, and I'll catch you later.